Hey, everybody, and thank you once again for joining us on the Remarkable Coach podcast. I am your host, Michael Pacheco, and today with me, I have Tom Henschel. Tom has been coaching senior corporate leaders for more than 30 years. He's known for his work with disruptive executives, in quotes, disruptive executives, and for helping people achieve the look and sound of leaders, which is also the name of his podcast, airing since 2008. Tom, welcome to The Remarkable Coach.
Thank you. I am really, really glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I like to kind of start out this podcast with just kind of a general, give us just a general kind of background. Who are you? What do you do? Let's start there and we'll kind of dig deeper as we see stuff to pick at.
Okay. So I'm an executive coach, been coaching for 30 years. Coach mostly in Fortune 500 companies, vice presidents and above. And, and this is my second career. So, but I've been doing this a long time and it's been a joy.
That's great. Coaching, I feel like, is the second or third or fourth or fifth career for a lot of coaches. What was your first career, out of curiosity?
I was a professional actor.
Oh, plot thickens.
Yeah. So I made my living in theater here in Los Angeles and in television here in Los Angeles for over 20 years.
Cool.
And then knew that career was not going to sustain me forever. It did very nicely for me for a while. And I knew I was going to teach. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as corporate learning or corporate training because I'd never had a job. I mean, literally I got out of school and started acting. So I'd literally never been in the workplace before. I didn't know anything. But when I found out about corporate training, I was like, oh yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. So I got into corporate training doing presentation skills because I was an actor, right? And then almost immediately got asked to coach when coaching was in its infancy.
Yeah, interesting. That is an unanticipated transition from acting. It's a delicate way of putting it, right?
There are some of us, but not many of us.
Yeah. How would you mind talking just a little bit about how that transition came to pass?
So when you ask how the transition came to pass, one of the things that I wonder is whether you're interested in the connective tissue. Right? Like what connected from one side of the bridge to the other. The bridge itself was really sad and painful for me. And it went on for about 5 years of transition. That was the actual transition where I was still shooting television and making a little bit of a living, but my income was going down and I was starting this business right? Yeah. But the connective tissue for me has always been that people have always interested in me. I have always been interested in people. I was the friend who got people to talk and tell their stories. I also loved being in front of people. So that still is all true.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Okay. Hey, so getting people to talk and tell stories. One of the things that you have mentioned to me previously before we hit record is that coaching is not therapy. But getting people to talk and kind of work through their problems, I believe is a big part of coaching. So where do you draw that line in the sand, and why do you draw it?
That coaching is not therapy?
Yeah.
I think there are two really different methods.
Okay.
Goals might be the same. So let's imagine, right, that in your lifetime, you're driving down the road of life and you hit this pothole, and it's the pothole that your siblings used to tease you about and your friends in high school used to give you grief about, and you heard about it in college. This is part of your life. And at some point it starts to hold you back. At some point it becomes an obstacle. It becomes a pothole. If you put a therapist in your car, here's what's going to happen. And this is, by the way, I am grateful for this process, but here's how it goes. You drive up to the pothole, you stop, you get out of the car, the therapist gets out of the car, puts you in the pothole and gets you to start repairing it like by the teaspoonful until it's up to the level of the road. And then, you know what? The pothole's actually gone. That's amazing. But it takes a long time.
Sure.
A coach is going to teach you to drive around the pothole.
That's a beautiful metaphor. I like that a lot. Listen, you don't have to spend 2 decades, filling in the pothole a teaspoon at a time. I'm going to teach you how to drive around it.
Right. But here's the thing. It's not healing. That pothole is going to come up again because you didn't fix it.
It's a workaround.
Right. And again, as a coach, what I'm hoping is that the workaround will work the next time too, but it's not healing. So a lot of times I talk with people about the kind of repair that I think they really need to do, and that this is a workaround. And I will say to people, I think you would like therapy. I think therapy would be helpful for you. Not because like you're sick, but it's like, because you sound like you're ready to do that work.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of those people. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's an interesting delineation. I like that. Tell us about confidentiality in corporate coaching. You're a corporate coach. You said you work primarily with Fortune 500 companies. I imagine, working with C-suite executives, you are probably exposed to all sorts of things, and you've signed every NDA this side of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes. And that goes without saying, but that's not the kind of confidentiality that I was thinking about.
Okay.
I was thinking about confidentiality like the way ICF talks about it, right? Like this whole idea that you aren't even supposed to know who I'm coaching. That it is confidential. Well, the instant the company's paying for it and there's goals involved and I'm talking to your boss, it's like, what's confidential here, right? And it can get really blurry. It can get really confusing. I had an HR person come to me at one point and say, well, I want to see his 360. And I was like, you can't see his 360. That's confidential. And she was like, I'm the HR, like I'm paying for this. Like what? And I was like, no, but I had to fight for that. I was like, I couldn't believe we were in that conversation because I think HR people actually respect it and know it for the most part, but it can be confusing. Here's another one, Michael, that happens all the time. Let's imagine that you're the boss and you've got somebody you want me to coach, right? And you tell me why you want me to coach her. And it's all clear. And the three of us talk together. At some point, you reach out to me, email, phone call, text message, whatever, and you go, how's the coaching going with her? Ooh, what am I supposed to say? Right? On some level, I want you to actually know. On some level, it's none of your business. It's a really weird tightrope to walk. It's a challenge. I think about it a lot.
So what does a typical engagement look like for you then? Have you had, a manager? Have you worked in engagements where it's more or less open season and there is very little confidentiality from the get-go and that's been established from the very beginning? Or is this pretty typical kind of tightrope for you to walk? Are you able to sort of address these issues before you begin an engagement?
Yes, exactly what you said, which is it's an issue that I talk about and clarify with everybody. In companies that are pretty sophisticated and have had a lot of coaches running around, or where I've been coached, been running around, I won't necessarily have the conversation every time. But certainly if I'm coaching you, wouldn't you want to know, like, what you and I talk about, like, am I going to go turn around and tell your boss?
Sure.
Yeah, right. So I'm very clear about, so I'm going to do it real quick. Here's how I explain it. If I were to say it to you, Michael, it's like what you and I talk about in our conversations is completely confidential. And your boss has some right to know. And here's what I will say when your boss asks me. The boss says to me, hey, how's that coaching going with Michael? I'll say, number one, have you asked Michael?
I like that.
And number two, I will say something that I have agreed with you that I may say. It will be an agreed upon thing of like, hey, I'd like to be able to say this. Are you cool with that? And sometimes people will go, actually, could you say it this way? I'm like, sure, I don't care, right? So it's all kind of, that part of it is kind of scripted, or at least the baseline of kind of where we are. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a challenge.
What does ICF have to say about that kind of stuff, about that relationship and the confidentiality?
Well, this is interesting. First off, ICF confidentiality is like their very first code of ethics. It is a really, 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 really important thing to them.
Okay.
Corporate coaching, the way I'm talking about it, doesn't fit inside the model. But quite a bit of what I do as a coach does not fit inside the ICF model. And so for me, by the way, I'm an enormous participant in my chapter. I'm a leader in the chapter at ICF, but there's much we do not agree on put it this way, there's a conversation I've been having with ICF people for as long as I've been in ICF.
Yeah.
Yeah. So confidentiality doesn't work in corporate coaching the way ICF needs it.
Can you talk a little bit about that conversation that you've been having with ICF?
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Trying to talk to them about like adapting things specifically for corporate coaching, where you've got, not only do you have peers, but you've got subordinates, you've got managers, and everyone wants a piece of that pie, right? It's the 360.
Yeah. So these are really interesting conversations. So these are conversations with other coaches in the Los Angeles chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not trying to push this to global or national or make this a policy change. But when I showed up, there's an idea in ICF that is really fundamental. And I'm guessing you've heard it. This idea that the client knows everything. And your job as a coach is to walk next to them, stay out of their way, and help them down the road. But it's their road to be defined by them.
You're just a guide. Yeah.
Okay. Here's the problem. For me, when I show up at ICF, I'm a corporate coach. You're going to pay me a lot of money to take some leader of yours and move that woman from point A on the map to who knows where, but some point that you've decided on the map. It's not her road. It's your road.
Mm-hmm.
There's a triangle now. Well, ICF doesn't allow for the triangle. So I showed up and went, but wait, I'm a coach. I really am. I swear to God, I'm a coach. How can you tell me that like my coaching doesn't work? It's just a different goal because I'm being hired to help you achieve a goal.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Is there, do you find that kind of is that like a conflict of interest that is it a problem? Is it an issue for you? Or you just work around it, do the best you can?
No, here's what I want to be clear about. This is a theoretical point of conversation for me and my colleagues who are part of ICF, who've gone through ICF training, who've gone through ICF certification, none of which I've done, Michael, because I started coaching before ICF was around. Seriously, like I'm older than ICF in this. But it's been a really interesting conversation about you guys coach differently than I do. And it's not that yours is better than mine, but they need to have place for each other. And if I went to an ICF training, I would be told I was coaching wrong. I'm not going to an ICF training, so it's not an issue, but do you know what I mean? There's a philosophical difference.
And certainly there's someone out there who's going to that training who is thinking about it in a similar way, or maybe the same way that you think about it, and they're being told that they're wrong, and they're like maybe confused, or, they see that conflict and they don't know what to do.
Well, it's interesting as there are more and more executive coaches, corporate coaches in ICF now. This is an easier conversation. At least there are more people who experience what I experience. When I first hit ICF, I was really like a penguin among giraffes or something. It was just like I did not belong there, but they were great people, and it's been a great experience. It has. And by the way, I just want to say, I've learned something really helpful from ICF, which is I ask way more questions now than I used to. Because of my ICF colleagues, my friends and colleagues I've listened to, and it's like, yeah, okay. And that's a good thing. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Why did you learn about question asking from them? What specifically spurred like that change in your behavior?
One of the things that I became aware of as I talked with other coaches is that I do make a choice at a certain point to put on my consultant's hat. That if I'm going to help get you to that other point on the map that your boss has for you, your HR group has for you, at some point, I'm probably going to need to be a trainer, a consultant, an advisor, or something to help you see this path. Because if you could see the path yourself, you'd be there and you wouldn't need a coach. So at some point, I'm going to be consulting. And again, ICF doesn't believe in consulting. So it made me very conscious of when I suddenly dropped into it with my clients. And I was like, wait, I bet I could ask 2 or 3 more questions before I make this point. And I do. And it's better. And often my point becomes irrelevant. I thought it was important, but I asked more questions and something else came up. It was great.
That's funny. I guess, just by asking questions, you increase the scope of context, right? In any given situation.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, even as simple, and again, I'm guessing that coaches who listen to this know this thing of like picking 2 or 3 words out of somebody's sentence and just repeating those 3 words back to them,
Mirroring.
and they keep talking,
Yeah.
and they just add. And by the way, I don't actually know what those 3 words mean. Like, you know what I mean? They'll refer to something in their family, and oh, it was really crazy, and you just go, really crazy,
Uh-huh.
right? Because I don't know what really crazy means.
Uh-huh.
So yes, it's always an unveiling for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating. It's really interesting.
You seem to really enjoy what you do. And I think there are certainly not a lot of coaches. You're in the minority. The amount of time that you have been doing this, you have so much experience. I mean, if you could talk a little bit about what you've done over the past 30 years to grow your business, to grow your coaching, to reach, for example, there are a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, and probably some people who have been on the podcast before who would love to work with Fortune 500 C-suite executives. What does it look like from year 1 to year 30 to go up that hill and to get to that point? How did you grow?
Well, I certainly started with a lot of help.
Okay.
A lot of help. Big network, but I was pulled into a coaching group that was literally kind of groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know anything at the time, but we were making up coaching.
Uh-huh.
But here's my point. I got put in front of people that I could have never gotten as a client.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anything. I was really green behind the ears, but I was being trained on the job with clients that were heavy hitters. So for my very next set of war stories, I had that to tell. But I never could have gotten that client on my own. Throughout my career, I have subcontracted to people who've put me into companies that I wouldn't have gotten into on my own because I'm just one guy, right? So that's one way to build your business is, with others. And now there's lots of coaching companies. Yeah. I started a coaching company like 30 years ago. It was great. I was one of the founding coaches and we built a business that was cool. But now there's big companies, big coaching companies. I mean, a friend of mine started that I coached for her I still coach for her. Mm-hmm. Arden Coaching, Marin Perry. I mean, Marin started this company, I don't know, I remember 2017 or something. And I've been with her forever. People now get work through Marin. Marin hires other coaches, right? I have sent her coaches.
Yeah.
You with me? So there's a lot of those coaching companies now. And I just think that's a great way to learn how to be probably at a level that you might not be able to get to on your own.
Yeah. Networking and community is kind of maybe the crux of kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah. Michael, having come from the theater world and television world and the acting world, there's nothing but scarcity. There's never enough. There's never enough time, money. I mean, it just doesn't matter, right? And there's not enough work. Everybody's starving. Yeah. So you get in this work, and the pleasure and the surprise for me was that there is enough work to go around, and we can help each other. In show business, you cannot help each other. There's too much scarcity. No. But yeah, that whole idea of networking, you don't know where your next job's coming from. And so, now look, in this time of COVID, it's very difficult. But I know that I built my career in rooms with what was then ASTD, ICF. I mean, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I love just the mindset of approaching that from a place of abundance and not scarcity, right? Not like there's not enough work to go around. There's lots of places that want leadership and guidance and coaching from a coach. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Well, I also think too that, at least for me, I did not show up assuming that my peers would ever be a resource for me as work, but they have been. They have been. And some of my very closest friends have given me wonderful work. And again, I just don't know that we ever think about that when we think about building our business. Because I feel really lucky that way. I
You're
do.
in a good spot to do it too. I feel like Los Angeles, there's people that are movers and shakers and whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, and there's people who have a willingness to talk about development,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, our ICF chapter is enormous. We give a lot of service, but man, oh man, there's a lot of coaches in the world, right? And there's all different kinds. I mean, there's some coaches who, by the way, are like when I used to be an actor, and other people would say, "Oh, I'm an actor,"
Uh-huh.
right? Like the truth was, I actually made my living as an actor. It was hard. It was not fun all the time, but I did it. And then there were people who were waiting tables and saying I'm an actor. There are some coaches like that too, who they've never actually had clients, but they're saying they're coaches. There's room for everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
those people show up willing to learn. They're great, So it's like it's a big community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I come from a music background, and I made a living as a professional musician for a couple years, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
So, but was it true for you that having a bigger network helped you get more work?
Oh, of course, there's just no question about it. Especially I mean, it's still kind of show business, right? It's entertainment, and knowing people and getting getting a gig opening for a bigger band, right? I mean, stuff like that. You got to know people and talk to people and network. I think I think it's super important for sure. And learning, right? Learning from other people who have been there and done that.
Yes.
Which is part of the purpose of this podcast.
I suppose that's true. Yeah. Well, then what else would be helpful for the people who listen?
Do you have any other like tips and tricks on building a coaching practice?
So, okay. Yeah, sure. Here's one. One of the things that I find ineffective when I listen to other coaches is that they don't help me quickly understand what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of explanation, but not a lot of understanding. I don't really understand what they're telling me. I think if you want to build your business, I think that has to be like, you have to nail that. I mean, that's when you like literally you meet. It's funny. Both scenarios that I just imagined were pre-COVID, right? Where you could meet someone casually, like if you've got kids who play soccer, the other parent who goes, "By the way, what do you do?" That's like, I think you should be able to nail that. And I think a lot of coaches, frankly, don't. I hear coaches talk about themselves and it's not clear. So that's one thing. If you want to build a business.
So let's dig into that a little bit. How do you do that? How does Tom do that?
Oh, well, listen, so I do it in some version of what you've already heard, which is I coach at Fortune 500 companies, vice presidents and above. That's it. I'm done. Right?
Yeah.
But I've given it to you, right? You know who I am.
Sure.
And so if you go, oh my God, my brother-in-law had a coach at his company because he works for this big old company. They gave him a coach. Are you like that? It's like, well, that was a lovely way to, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just clear and simple.
Yeah.
And I love it when other coaches can do that.
So, yeah, I mean, essentially what you're talking about then is, niching down, figuring out what you do, figuring out who you serve, right?
It could be that, or it could be what pain do you relieve?
Okay.
That's a really powerful sentence when you could say something like, this isn't exact, but it's, I help people who are often tagged as disruptive executives. I just told you what pain I relieve. And you've got me again, right? You've just got me. And whether it's a niche or whether I can do more than that or whatever, it's some way to just go the next step to see if you're even interested in talking about any of this, right?
What do you think about like a results-based kind of synopsis? So working with disruptive executives is kind of focused on the pain, right? Or what about results-based? Would that be?
Sure, because listen, I mean, it's my tagline is I help people achieve the look and sound of leadership.
There it is.
So sure, I mean, that's the result, right? Like, or by the way, the other thing that people tag on me all the time, I don't say it about myself very often, but people say it about me is executive presence. In other words, they've taken the look and sound of leadership, flipped it into executive presence, and they go, Tom does executive presence. And I go, that's fine by me. Right? I mean, but that's helpful. It's like, good, they've got me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think it helps build the business because we're all cluttered, and so, I mean, especially for me, like I meet a lot of people at ICF and I'm grateful. I'm so glad. But there's a certain point where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't remember. Does she do what? Right? If I wanted to call on somebody, if I don't have them filed well, then I can't be very helpful to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What are some of your, two questions. You can answer them in whichever order you like.
Okay.
One, what is just a really big win that you've had, a big change that you've had in a leader? We don't have to talk about specifics in terms of who, but one big win, and then the follow up to that, or possibly the precursor, would be, what about a big failure? A time that you really shot for the moon and you didn't quite make it, and you learned something huge from that.
Sure. So I'll take it in the order you asked.
Okay.
This win was so miraculous. I have no explanation and no explanation for it at all. I'm serious, but it was like, I don't know if I'm even part of this story or not. So there was this Israeli scientist who was running a lab and for a big, huge pharmaceutical company. And that's a big responsibility. And people were livid. They were going to leave the company over this guy. They hated this guy. I get this gig. This is my coaching now. Like, fix this guy.
Fix this disruptive leader.
Yes, right. It is disruptive executive, man. He sure was. So I do a 360 for him that's completely anecdotal. It's totally verbatim. There's no quantitative anything in it. And it's probably 14 pages of just verbatim comments. And he reads this thing. And I'm with him, by the way. He's reading it for the first time. We're together in his office. And he looks at me and he said, I had no idea. And that was the moment. He got it. He totally got it. And he never did some of that stuff ever again.
He just needed visibility.
He somehow literally just needed the mirror to be held up to him.
Yeah.
He was such a smart guy. The coaching with him was incredibly successful, but not because of me, but you know what I mean? It's like, but he had a transformation. That's amazing. Don't we all wish for that? That's a win.
That's amazing. That's great.
So
I'm jealous.
But like I say, it's like, that was a gift. That was a gift. It doesn't happen often. So I don't know if this is a failure or not. I took on a job through a referral. The company was pretty small. They're not terribly sophisticated about coaching. But the CEO wanted me to coach his director of operations. Okay. I talked to the CEO. He's pretty clear with me about what he wants. I talked to the COO. And I want to tell you, Michael, it's bizarre. It is truly like I could not get any agreement with this man. Like, he did not agree with the goals. I'm not saying it was just amazing. There was just no traction anywhere. If we go back to the analogy of, a coach is going to help you drive around the pothole, he wouldn't even get in the car. He wouldn't acknowledge there was a car. I could not get a coaching conversation started with this man at all.
Was it
at all?
Personality?
No. Oh, no, he liked me. No, he was super agreeable, but he would change the subject. He would talk about other stuff. It was amazing. It was like trying to hold, 12 slippery eels. I mean, it was just like, and I tried. I mean, I would get down to granular, like, can we agree on what just got said just right now? And I finally went back to the CEO and went, I'm stopping the coaching. This doesn't work.
And,
this is not, I'm not your guy, or he's not ready, or I don't know what. I don't remember what I said. I did not throw him under the bus. But like, that felt like a quote unquote failure. I could not get traction with someone. That's very rare. Yeah.
What was your end analysis of that? Was he, well, it's anonymous at this point, so you can talk about it with some honesty, I guess. Do you think maybe perhaps he wasn't ready to do the work, or was it something else? Do you know?
Boy, I wish I knew. I mean, I could try and psychologize him. And
Yeah.
here's what I would say. He was heavily defended against me.
Uh-huh.
And I could not find a way in through his defense.
Just had a wall.
Well, but again, not unpleasant, not argumentative, very pleasant, very friendly. And by the way, he and I laughed together a lot, partly because I was trying to disarm him, but I was happy to be, whatever. Yeah, he was just heavily defended. That's what I make of it. And whatever, like, yeah.
Can't win them all.
Well, I think in both cases, what's kind of interesting as I listened to it, it is not what I was thinking when we started. In some ways, both of those are not about me, but it's my biggest win and biggest failure, that I was witness to.
And isn't that, I mean, that kind of speaks to what coaching is all about, right? We were talking earlier in the show about coaching. You're a guide. You're not the star of the show. You're not Luke Skywalker, you're Obi-Wan.
Yeah. No, but that's a really good point. No, that's true. That's a really good point. Yeah. So I'm glad it was about them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Cool. What sorts of things in a more typical engagement, what sorts of things do you struggle with? And how do you overcome those struggles?
That's interesting. I don't know that I struggle in my coaching. I think so. My answers to that, if I really ask myself, the struggle is to stay as present as I can be, to not psychologize, not go to consulting too early. That's the stuff that I struggle with. It's a kind of staying as long as I can in curiosity. That's what I struggle with. But that's me, right? I mean, that's not about them. Because if I stay in
30 years of practice, right? That's you with 30 years of practice.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Yes. No, but I think you're right. I think 10 years ago, I would have told you something different. That's a really good observation. Yeah.
Okay.
But staying curious saves my ass all the time. And there's some kind of simplicity in it where I go, I wish I'd known it sooner. Yeah, it's really interesting. In the pandemic, my family has been doing weekly phone calls that last 2 hours. And for over a year, we were doing it twice a week. and it was just these completely unstructured calls where we would just all get on the line together, and we would all just be sitting down. And sometimes we'd be having a drink, or sometimes we'd be having food or whatever. Sure. And different families would pop in and out. What was interesting was how easy I found it to keep conversations going. And my family reflected it back to me about my curiosity. And they said when I was not on the calls were much shorter. And I think, Michael, that's just something that I have developed over the years as a coach, and it's served me incredibly well. I'm very glad to have it. And it's enriched my life too. That just kind of being curious. It's really been interesting. I've learned a lot.
That's got to serve you well as a coach, because we were talking earlier too about asking more questions. And you're not going to come up with good questions if you're not genuinely curious in whatever it is you're poking at, you're digging at, right?
Yes, I agree. Because yes, if you're really interested in something, it's pretty easy to ask another question.
Yeah. Ideally.
Yeah, no, but it is, right? If I'm interested, then I'll ask if that's natural. Yeah. So yeah, and remaining in curiosity, staying that way, it's hard. It is. Especially, by the way, because I often feel that I do have a clock ticking, that I kind of know. I know it's like we're at session number 7, but we've only got 12. And it's like, we're not as far as we should be. And I'm owning that. That's my responsibility, is to help you get to that point on the map, whatever that was that we agreed on. So, on some levels, yeah, I'd love to be as patient as I can as your guide. But there's certain times where I feel like, oh my God, could we just get in the car and drive a little? Like, gee whiz, come on. So, yeah.
I could see. Yeah, you want to see some. You want to build some traction, which then leads to momentum, right? And you want to leave them with, you want to leave them with some momentum so that they're doing good.
Well, listen, I get hired usually as an investment in a leader. right? That we want to promote her. We want to be sure she stays. We want her team to be more productive, whatever it is. It's an investment. It's not a punishment, right? So we want her to win, whatever win is. And usually she does too. So what I hope is that by the time I walk out the door, she's winning. She knows how to do it, right? So the idea here for me is I have my eye on helping her win, whatever success has been defined as. And the boss, I want everybody to think I was a miracle worker or whatever, right? I want them to be happy, but it's my job to deliver her to the depot on this day in this way. So it's like, yeah.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned 12 sessions. What does a typical engagement look like between you and a client? I'm guessing 12 sessions.
So yes, 12 sessions, but there's lots that goes before it and during it. So it starts with a lot of goal setting, talking to the boss, talking to whoever there might be other stakeholders, getting a 360, talking to the person I'm going to coach. Like, we haven't had any coaching sessions yet, and I've already put in a lot of hours on this person, right? And I'm learning a lot about them. And then I assemble a 360 and we do an assessment, usually DISC, sometimes Myers-Briggs, don't know, usually DISC. And then we meet for the first time. So you've got all this feedback to talk about. You've got an assessment to talk about, and we're going to set more goals. And then we're going to go back and refine the goals with your boss. And this is all in the first 1, 2, 3 sessions that we're doing. We're still goal setting. But what's also happening, Michael, is we're talking about the issue over and over in different ways. And the issue, we're actually getting started, right? So then there's some bosses like to be kept informed. Some bosses like check-ins. Some HR people like check-ins, whatever. You manage the client, right? There's another point on the triangle. So you just need to manage that point on the triangle. And at some point at the end, usually between the 11th and 12th session, the client and I will go back to the boss or back to the HR leader or whatever it was who's kind of holding the kind of spyglass and say, we think we crossed this line. This is where we think we are. And this is how, if you want to keep her growing, this is how to do it.
Yeah. And
it's kind of like a handoff and a celebration, and they cut me a check.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I want to keep, I see we're coming up near the top of the hour here, and I want to respect your time. I got one more question. You've mentioned the word consulting a few times in this call in a way that it seems there's a clear delineation between consulting and coaching. Talk a little bit about your definition of those two things and why you draw a line in the sand between them.
So consulting is going to be some form of teaching, training, advising. Consulting, literally, like seriously, like I'm a communications coach. I have a million ways to help you fight, help you influence, help you present, help you have high impact with words, run your meetings. Like, I'm a communications guy. I have tons I could tell you. So that would be me consulting. And I will often stop where we are in a conversation and I will say to somebody, I'm going to take my coach hat off for a minute. Can I put my consulting hat on? Because there's something I'd like to teach you. And I say those words, there's something I'd like to teach you. And usually people go, yeah. And I'll teach them a trick or something or a model or something. And they'll go, that was great. That was me as a consultant. That was not me as a coach.
That's great too. And I want to, point out for our listeners that wording it in that way and asking permission to teach them something is a great trick for in cognitive science, in behavioral psychology, that they've given you permission for something, they will actually accept it more, and it will become more real and internalized in them because you asked for permission. That's a great approach for that. I love that.
The other thing is, truly, Michael, I just do have a lot of tools. And my, like, for example, ask more questions means I teach fewer tools.
Mhm.
But like the podcast that I've been doing forever and ever, I mean, that's all it is. It's those communication tools. It's all that stuff. Because it's stuff that I think we all should learn. And especially, by the way, as coaches, what comes out of our mouths, it's loaded, it's heavy, it's important. If people are going to give you their trust, they're going to trust you. You need to be careful with what you say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tom, this has been a pleasure. I know that you have a readiness and coaching kind of ebook. Will you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about that before we wrap up?
So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about it, which is this grew out of the very first coaching group I ever was part of, called Corporate Coaching International. And we were trying to make up coaching, and we wanted to figure out who was uncoachable. Mm-hmm. People that we would say, no, we're not going to coach those people. We're not therapists. We're not fix-it people. We're not going to coach them. And so we made a list. And that list that we made all those, like, close to 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I've turned it into a PDF that has 4 that I think are really helpful. Now, again, it's written for executives, but it doesn't need to be that. It's 4 qualities that you want to look for in someone. And if somebody doesn't have any of them, they're probably not going to be a very good coaching candidate. Like that guy I couldn't get traction with. Mm-hmm. He would be this. He would be this.
You should have made this PDF before you talked to that guy. It wouldn't have been a problem.
There you go. I guess it just took me a while to figure it out. So listen, they can have that. You'll have it, Michael. They can get it through you. You can always get it through my website. It's the Essential Communications website. It's essentialcomm.com. And there's just tons of free tools there. So help yourself.
Essential Comm with 2 M's. We'll of course link to this on the show notes. And I'm assuming on your website there's a place to sign up for that PDF on the website.
Sure. Well, you can download it for free, and yes, you get 3 for free before we ask for your email. But there's tons in there, so it's a really cool library, and awesome. And all the podcasts is there.
Fantastic. Tom Henschel, thank you so much for joining us on the Remarkable Coach podcast. This has been a pleasure.
It has. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers and our listeners. We will catch you all next time. Cheers.